In this video, I'm going to do a demo of working with arrays. Now, arrays seem to confuse people, but all they are is just, think of an array as being a list where the size of the list can't change. An array is just a group of variables. There's nothing more complicated than that. So to create an array, you have to specify what type of object you want to have in your array. So just like when you make one variable, you make an integer called x and you set it to 10 or something like that. You say, I want to make an integer and there's the name and there's the value. Now let's say we want to make an array of numbers. So not just one number, but more than one number. Well, let's call our array numbers. Now, how do I specify that numbers contains a block of variables and not just one? Well, we use the square brackets for that. The square brackets after the type indicate that this is an integer array. It's not just one integer, it's an array of integers. Now, we haven't at this point specified how many integers we want in our array, and there's a bunch of ways we can do that. So let's just say we wanted to make an array and we knew what values we wanted in the array. We could just put them in here like this: 4, 6, 7, 11, negative 99, 1,000, whatever. Okay, so bad dog. Okay, so the values that go inside the curly braces here then become the values in numbers. So numbers here will contain the numbers 4, 5, 6, 11, negative 99, and 1,000. So what is that? That's 6 values. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating an array of numbers, an array of integers that contain those values. So slot 0 will have this value, slot 1 will have this, slot 2 will have that, because the slots start at 0. Now, how do I specify a slot? Well, that is where we get into an index. Okay, so we'll get to that in a second. Now, let's just say I wanted I wanted 10 number or an array of maybe like I've got a high score list or something. I want an array that's got 10 slots or 10 integers, but I don't necessarily know what they are yet. So that's where we use the new operator, new integer array, and then we specify inside the square brackets how many integers we want. So this is an integer array called scores, and we are assigning it to a new integer array with 10 slots. So the slots are going to be numbered from 0 to 9. So, and here the Visual Studio is figuring out that we have 6 values because we've supplied 6 values in the curly braces. Here we're explicitly stating we want an array of 10 integers, and they're all going to get set to 0 because we didn't really specify any values. Now, how could I print these out? Well, this is when you have a list of integers or an array of integers or an array of anything. This is where lists become very useful. So let's use like a for each loop here. And we'll say for every integer I in numbers, let's print I. So it's console or .write line, CW tab, write line I. There we go. So now if I run this, it should print out 4, 5, 6, 11, negative 99, and 1,000. So let's just put a breakpoint here. I'm going to hit F9, and let's run this real fast. And Visual Studio will start up, and it will pause there. Now let's go into our, using the debugger, let's look at what's inside of numbers. You can see inside of slot 0, or in index 0, we have the 4. In index 1, we have the 5. In index 2, we have the 6. In index 3, we have the 11, and so on. So now if we run this, I'm going to hit the continue button here. A little terminal pops up, and you can see that it prints out the numbers in our array. Now let's do that with scores, and you can see that they'll all be 0. It should print out 10 zeros. Let's do that. So if we look in scores, we can see there are 10 zeros starting in slots 0 and ending up in slot 9 as the last slot, because indexes start at 0. Let me run this and we get 10 zeros. There we go. What if we wanted an array of strings? Well, we could say string array. I don't know, like months or something equals Jan, Feb, because I don't really want to type this all out. March, April. You get the idea here. Semicolon. So what I have, oh, I forgot the missing a quotation mark there. So this is going to make a list of strings, and in index 0 will be the word Jan, and index 1 will be Feb, and 3, 0, 1, 2 will be March, April will be 3. And if we print those out, now see here I have to change the data type. For every string, say for every string S in months, print out S. And let's run that. I could have called it I. I is just kind of short for integer. So there's our months array. And you can see in slot 0 is the January, and slot 1 is the is Feb. You can see what's in each individual slot. If I run this and dump it out, there we go. You can see I printed it out. Now let's look at another type of loop here. So that was our for each loop. Let's look at a for loop. FOR tab tab. So this is when you're kind of using a counter to loop through an array. And when we do this, we need to know how long our array is. So we can ask the array how long it is. Arrays have a length property. They know how long they are. And now if we want to print out, we have to somehow use I to get the month we want. So we're going to use I as an index. So an index means go into a slot and get out whatever is there, or go into a slot and change whatever's there or something. So let's do console.writeLine. Now, how do I get the ith value out of the months array? Months, square brackets, I. Let's get the ith month out of months. So when I is 0, we're going to print out the thing in index 0. When I is 1, it'll print out the thing in index 1. When I is 2, it'll print out the index thing in index 3, and so forth. And now if I run this, well, it should actually print out the months, and then it should also print out the months again. So you can see both loops did exactly the same thing. It's like if you need the index for some reason, you can do it this way. These two things are equivalent, and the for each loop syntax is a little bit easier. Now with let's go back to doing our for each. So let's print out our numbers array here. For each int, well, I don't know, n in numbers. All right, now let's do something here. Let's switch the integers. Let's switch the first and last things in numbers. So how do you switch things in an array? Well, you need a temporary variable. So let's make a temporary integer, and we'll set it to numbers square brackets 0. And so that saves the first element. How do I get the last element? Well, that's going to be the thing. What's the index of the last element? Well, it's the length of the array minus 1, because the array indexes start at 0 and not 1. So it's the length minus 1. So let's get the last element. I didn't really need to do that, but now I could print them out. Now what if I wanted to switch them? Well, I could take the, I've saved the first thing here, so now I can take the last thing and I can assign it to numbers square brackets 0. So remember, the equal sign means evaluate the expression on the right and put it into the target location on the left. Move last element. There we go. All right, so I've moved I made a copy of the last element in index 0, and now in the last slot there, I need to put the temp one, the one that I saved. So we've discussed this before back in Lua. So if I run this now, we should see that the number 1000 prints out and the number 4 prints first. No, prints last. So the 1000 and the 4 have switched. So it should be 1000, 5, 6, 11, negative 99, 4. And let's run it and make sure that that's exactly what happens. There you go. So the 1000 printed out first. So the square brackets seem to give people a lot of trouble, but it just means go into a particular slot in that array and get something out, or add 1 to it, or whatever. But when you're working with an array, it is probably going to be followed by the square brackets. And inside of the square brackets, you put the index. What goes in the index? The position of the thing you are trying to to access. So like just as an example here, let's do a for loop. For I equals numbers, square brackets, no, numbers dot length. So for everything in that list, what we're going to do is say numbers, square brackets, I plus plus. So what this is going to do is it's going to loop through. It's going to add 1 to everything in the array. So when I is 0, we're going to go into slot 0 and add 1 to that thing. When I is 1, we'll go into slot 1 and add 1 to that thing. When I is 2, we'll go into that thing. We'll go into slot 2 and add 1 to that. So now if I run this, and did I really need to do this? I could have combined these two things. Let's run that again and see what happens. There you go. So now we have 1001. So everything has had 1 added to it. So there you go. That is how you can create arrays. This is if you're creating a list with an array with a known set of values. Here is you're just creating a bunch of empty slots. So there's 2 ways to create your array like that. And then you can either use the for each loop or the for loop to iterate through them. And but if you use the for loop, then you need the square brackets to access an element. So what goes inside the square brackets? The index, the position of the thing that you're trying to manipulate. That's really all there is to it. I mean, arrays give people a hard time. I don't really think they're that confusing, but if you need more help, you want another review of arrays, just let me know. I'll be happy to do it.